From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is Politics and the Past. This is our Thursday episode, which means that we try to talk about more contemporary issues. On the Monday podcast, we might talk about research, might talk about some historical aspects of American politics, but on the Thursday episodes, we try to talk about more contemporary stuff. And today, I am joined by Jake Dueck. And am I pronouncing the last name right? I forgot to clear that beforehand.
Yes, you are.
Jake Dueck. Okay. So usually my partner in crime here is Jack Henricks, but Jack had a scheduling conflict, and so we're bringing in Jake to pinch hit. We've had Jake on before on the first Gen Z roundtable, and we're gonna have Jake on a bunch more, I'm sure. Jake is the president of the Politics and Leadership Club here at in the Center for American Institutions at Arizona State University. And he being the president means that you have to moderate all the discussions, right?
Moderate most of them, yes, but that's something we've started doing as a new initiative this semester, is having more of our officers moderate.
Okay, so it doesn't all just fall on you then.
No, in years past, it was the president who moderated every discussion, but given the talent that we have on the officer team, I thought it would be a waste if we didn't have some of our officers lead discussions.
In Maoist terms, you're talking about collective leadership as opposed to
Well, in some respects, I mean, yeah, it helps to, kind of break up some of the monotony of having the same approach to every discussion. But in terms of the long-term health of the club, it helps to spread out knowledge about how to lead the club so that when one president leaves, the entire thing doesn't completely change.
absolutely very wise.
Thank you.
All right, Jake. Can you tell us a little bit about the club itself?
Sure. So the Politics and Leadership Club is usually sold as a political dialogue club. When I go to recruitment events, I tell people we just have discussions. It's very low commitment. We don't have any dues or membership requirements. You're not required to speak at any of our meetings. We try to keep it informal because the informal environment seems to engender the most discussion, the most viewpoints, and in my opinion, the most productivity. We meet once a week for about an hour. We have free food because free food is wonderful and it keeps people coming.
Especially if you're a college student.
Absolutely. And we try to talk about things that are interesting, but not too polarizing. We want to talk about things that will generate more nuanced perspectives, less black and white. So we try to avoid issues like, say, abortion or gun rights, and we try to focus on things like constitutionalism or education or AI, where it's not so black and white. And with that approach, we've had more consistent membership. We've had a greater diversity of membership. And again, if you ask me, I feel like myself, our officers, and all of our members have learned more because of the diversity of viewpoints that come to the club.
Right. Right. Okay, that's great. And I also think that I mean, one of the pillars for here at the Center for American Institutions is this insistence on freedom of speech and civic dialogue.
Yes.
And one of the ways that we try to practice what we preach is through the Politics and Leadership Club. And but that of course falls on you. Your capable shoulders, the president's shoulders. And we were just chatting a little bit before we started here, and you describe yourself as studiously independent.
Yes.
I suspect that is a bit of an advantage
Yes, it is.
when you're dealing with club members and when you're dealing with the club at large.
Absolutely. I would say so. You're absolutely correct. I define myself as an independent. I'm a registered independent. I like to think that I'm a moderate. I do not align myself with either party. And again, that really does help lead discussions because I don't have an agenda to push. I don't volunteer for candidacies. I don't endorse anybody. Um, I view it as my job to get as many people to share their thoughts as possible. And it is definitely a lot easier to do that when I don't automatically identify with one side.
Right. You don't have any skin in the game.
No, I really don't.
Yeah. or you're not emotionally attached to an argument necessarily. At least most of the time, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, obviously, I have my opinions, but again, like, I'm not trying to promote one side over the other or make one side look better. And it's the same as my political approach. I want to learn the most that I can about an issue and make the most informed decision that is the best for everyone. And that informs my approach to the club. I want to learn. I want to learn what people think. I want to hear their ideas. I want to learn what I need to learn. I want to learn what I don't know. And I want other people in the club to have that same experience. And if the meetings are designed in a manner that encourages as many people to speak as possible, regardless of their political background or their beliefs, their experiences, or if we're being honest, how much evidence they bring to the table, it is, in my opinion, valuable to hear what people think, regardless of where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Very interesting. You guys have had one of maybe the most successful semester you've ever had with the club.
Yes, if you measure it in terms of membership, yes. And again, if you ask me the quality of our meetings, I would say yes there too. It's been very successful.
I mean, obviously, that's a result of your incredible leadership.
Well, thank you.
But
It's not just me, it's our incredible officer team. It is absolutely a team effort, and I couldn't do it without Jack, Elise, and Emma.
fair enough. Well, we've had them all on at various times, and they are pretty impressive. So it definitely reflects well. But what are some of the again, what are some of the um, successes you can point to? Participation. Where are you guys at with participation this semester versus previous semesters?
Well, the easiest metric to look at is membership because that's quantifiable. And if you measure it on terms of quantity, this semester's been a huge success. This is my 5th semester with the club now. I was a member for both semesters as a freshman and a officer as a sophomore for my 2nd year. So I've been around for a while. I've seen several different approaches, a few different leadership styles, and I've seen the club grow and I've seen it shrink. I've seen semesters where we finish strong with 20, maybe even 30 at the end, and I've seen semesters where we finish around 10. This semester has really blown it out of the water. Our very first meeting, we counted 90 people. 90 people. I've never seen that many before ever. We had to move out of the old conference room and do a lecture hall.
And just for listeners, like that's 90 people on a Monday
Yeah.
that nobody is compelled to come other than you, Jake.
No more free food?
And I mean, we have the free food, but nobody's compelled to come.
No.
And you had 90 people show up to
Mhm.
discuss a political issue.
Yes, and that was the very first meeting. A lot of people had never been there before.
Right. And so how did you guys finish the semester?
Well, we always start out a lot bigger because, people are checking things out, seeing if it fits in their schedule. That's happened every semester I've been with the club. And so we were expecting a decrease, but I didn't expect it to stabilize at the number that it did. As the semester went on, I'm sure by the second meeting, each semester does us a little dirty because we meet on Mondays and there's always some sort of holiday on the second week. So it's really hard to follow up between the very first meeting and the next one, but
So you're suggesting you're upset at Labor
a little bit. And Martin Luther King Day.
Day.
But we're coming up with ways to work around that. Some non-Monday meetings, but around our second meeting, we had maybe a little over 60. And throughout the semester, we kind of fluctuated between 40 and 60. On some of our lower days, we maybe had 38, 39. But at our final meeting, the last week of class after Thanksgiving, we had a solid 50. I was very pleased with that. And even on our off days, I'm using air quotes for the people listening. One of our vice presidents, Jack, who's been on the podcast, I think many times now.
Many times, yeah.
Yes, he pointed out that many clubs would kill to have 37, 38 be an off day or even an on day.
No kidding.
Like most clubs don't have that many people come that regularly.
Right, and this is I mean, again, it's a dialogue. It's not
Yes.
like it's a rah-rah, you know, I mean, no, it's an exciting, entertaining discussion,
Mhm.
but it's not like a rah-rah, energy-building partisan event or anything.
No.
So it for again, having 40 people on a Monday night that they don't have to show 40 to 90 people on a Monday night when they don't have to show up. It
Mhm.
just, I think, speaks to the interest that so many students really do have for not just politics and public affairs, but an opportunity to discuss it with their peers in a moderated but, you know, warm environment.
I completely agree, and if I may, I the success of the club isn't just measured in the quantity, it's also in the quality. Um, as I've said earlier, our approach to the discussion is A, to provide structure, to encourage people to speak, but we also want as many people to speak as possible and as many different people to speak as possible. We, as speakers and moderators, try to tie it all together at the end and offer a little bit of spiel, but we try to not put too much of ourselves in the conversation. And in our meetings, obviously, there are more people, so there are more people speaking, but based on semesters past, it's not just the politicos that are speaking.
Mm,
It's the people that maybe aren't super invest in minute politics. It's people that aren't or maybe aren't even political science majors and that just want to share their thoughts. And I think the biggest difference is how many people linger after our meetings and for how long. The discussion continues even after our allotted meeting time ends. And again, it's not just people from the same parties talking, it's often people from opposite sides that are complimenting each other on how they spoke, acknowledging that they maybe never thought of that viewpoint, and continuing their discussion in a respectful, polite, and productive manner. And membership aside, that is what makes me the most excited about this club, that people continue talking about what we're talking about in the meeting beyond the confines of the club.
Well, I mean, what you have here is, I mean, what your success is remarkable, and I do see that, like, after the meeting, people lingering around and chatting. I haven't attended one of the meetings, but I see them. I don't wanna feel like I'm this weird professor is in there, so I wanna, you guys to have your own meeting, but I do see the, uh, the discussions afterwards, and
Mhm.
it's very interesting, respectful discussions. So now what we have to figure out how to do is to scale up from
Right?
50 to 90 people
Mhm.
to 50 to 90 million people.
Right?
Yeah. So that's the next step. I'll leave maybe that's the next semester problem.
Sure.
Okay, well, given the fact that you've had some experience in the club for a while now, and now that you're the chairman, chief officer of the club, you're maybe in one of the best positions of anybody on campus to talk a little bit about what politics on campus is like now
Mm.
in 2025. So, are you able to, in a from a broad perspective, from the moment you arrived on campus to now, how have you seen politics on campus change? And I don't mean right wing versus left wing, maybe I just mean the political environment on campus.
Sure. It definitely seems less delineated, if that makes sense. It feels like there's less red tape when people are speaking. There's less risk. It's still there. I mean, this is a university. This is where a lot of the ideas around identity politics and stuff like microaggressions were born. And though it's definitely retreated from the national stage, this is still its home and it's still there, but it's definitely quieted down quite a bit. I remember when I was a freshman, and if my voice and manner of speaking doesn't give it away, I am a tall, white, straight dude. And so obviously you can imagine what being on a university campus was like. I'll admit that sometimes I was afraid to speak my mind because of the social consequences for saying something that maybe didn't agree with the university policy at the time. And At that time, when I was a freshman, the Politics and Leadership Club definitely seemed like more of a refuge for people seeking to escape that. And in a way, it's remained like that. I think in years prior, there were definitely more conservative speakers and even moderate speakers. I mean, I said I define myself as a moderate, and I still hold to that. And even people who identify politically like me were seeking refuge in places like the Politics and Leadership Club. I still think that the club serves that kind of purpose because it seems that most political clubs seek to promote some sort of action plan or agenda, and that makes sense. That's the role of politics. And I want to continue the Politics and Leadership Club's role as a refuge from all that partisanship and a space for people to speak openly and not be shouted down and just given a chance to speak and not be told that what they're saying is wrong, even if myself as a moderator or one of our other moderators might disagree with them. I want to continue that. But at the same time, it definitely seems like the noose has loosened a little bit. People are more comfortable. And I would think that that has something to do with why our club has grown. People feel more comfortable speaking. They feel more comfortable speaking to people that think differently. That's a key point. And if I may continue for a little bit, I am there was a student from the Cronkite School of Journalism that reached out to me and asked me about the club and what I thought about free speech on campus, very similar to what we're doing now. But he was asking specifically about the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination and how that affected free speech, and whether or not that emboldened students that were more conservative or on the right. And if you ask me, I would say it's had the opposite effect. Based on what I've seen compared to semesters past and semesters now. I mean, the club always fluctuates in terms of where the average political leaning is.
Who the median voter is.
Yes,
Yeah.
sometimes it's been more right-leaning, sometimes it's been more moderate. This semester, it leans a little bit more left, and I'm sure it's gonna go back and forth. But I have a feeling that part of why it leans a little bit more left is because our conservative speakers seem to be holding back a little bit. I think that the Charlie Kirk assassination really shook up the right here on campus. And part of why I say that, one of our officers considers herself to be on the right, and she's one of my good friends, and she was very shaken up by Charlie Kirk's assassination. And from what I've seen, a lot of other conservative speakers feel the same way. So to summarize all that I just said, I would say that political speech seems to be a little bit more comfortable in terms of students speaking their mind, especially moderates like myself. But because of what's happened recently, namely with Charlie Kirk's assassination, it seems to me that our conservative students are a little bit more reluctant to speak.
As reluctant as they were maybe maybe 2 years ago?
I'm not sure. 2 semesters ago, it almost seemed like indignant, like they were coming to the club to speak their mind because they were frustrated. They didn't like the current system that was in place. Now it seems to me like they're frightened instead of frustrated. And
Hmm,
to me, that seems different. It was almost like they were seeking controversy, you know? I don't want to say antagonistic because they have a right to speak, but it was almost more like protesting, you know, again, indignant. But now there's an element of fear. And I think that applies to everyone in some respect, but especially our students on the right.
interesting. Very interesting. Huh. Lot to chew on there. I wish I had a good follow-up to that, but I actually don't think I do. I think I need to think about it for a while.
That's fair.
Maybe as we keep talking, I'll come up with a follow-up.
Mhm.
So a few semester or 2 we're coming up well, we're just past the 2-year anniversary of October 7th.
Yes.
And, 2 years ago, there were encampments on universities across the United States,
Mhm.
occupations of buildings across the United States, and it seemed like the radicalness that people were afraid of on campus had emerged fully fledged.
Yes.
I know that Arizona State University didn't quite have the problem, didn't quite have the movement to the same extreme of, say, places like Columbia
Right.
or other maybe more elite private universities. But um, have you seen the? I'm going to use the word excitement around that issue. How have you seen that fluctuate?
Well, it obviously reached a fever pitch around the time that it happened. Uh, Real quick, the benefit of being a moderate and identifying as an independent is I get to have a very wide range of friends. I've been good friends with the former president of Turning Point on campus, and consider myself friends with people that were at the Palestine protests and that were arrested for it. So I have been exposed to people on both extremes of the issue. And obviously, it did reach a fever pitch around the time that it happened. I think it was at the end of the spring semester my freshman year. That must have been May of 2024 when there were encampments on Old Main on campus here that were dispersed and some arrests made. That was definitely when the excitement was at its peak, if you asked me. It was very, very difficult for me as a moderate to be friends with people that subscribed to that movement because of how demanding it seemed. Just real quick personal story. I had a very close friend from high school. We shared many experiences. We had a lot in common, but over that issue, she completely cut me off, no contact, because I refused to deny that Israel had a right to exist. I'm a moderate. I believe in a two-state solution. Obviously, I believe Hamas is a terrorist group. I don't.
You
Sure.
can be just before you can be a moderate, but doesn't mean you have to be a moderate on everything. Yeah.
Of course, of course. I mean, like, I'm a history major. I've studied the history. I took a class on Jewish civilization my first semester here. I've learned all about the Oslo Accords, the Intifadas, and all of that.
Sure.
And there's definitely there are grievances that are, if you ask me, justified on both sides. But I wasn't willing to acknowledge that Israel didn't have any right to exist. She called me a Zionist, and that was the last day I ever heard of her. That, if you ask me, that was the worst that it got. Now, it doesn't seem like that. It's definitely cooled down. It's not as black and white. It seems that you can hold a more nuanced opinion of this issue and not be ostracized. Because again, if you ask me, one of the most self-destructive tendency of that movement and many extremist issues on both the right and the left, but especially the left, is that they're not very good at recruiting people because they automatically outgroup anyone who doesn't automatically agree with every tenet of their platform, so to say.
Right.
Exhibit A, the experience I had with that former friend of mine. Again, it doesn't seem like that anymore. It seems like there's more room for complexity, especially as this issue has sort of panned out for quite a while and it's more complex. People are starting to see things differently, especially with regards to support for Israel. And so to answer your question directly, that excitement over that movement specifically peaked a few months after October 7th. It took a while to gain momentum, hit a fever pitch May of 2024, and it's been cooling off ever since.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, part of the other reason that it might be have cooled off is that those who were particularly radical and prone to radicalism went whole hog in with the movement, and they cut everybody else out of their lives, so you just don't encounter them anymore.
Exactly.
In this case, right?
It's an isolating political movement. I'm not sure what the thought was behind that or if there was thought behind it, but if you ask me, it's not a winning political strategy.
No, no, it never has been. I mean, ultimately, this is one of the things with radical political strategies is that
Yes.
they are self-defeating,
Mhm.
especially when, in order to be a member of whatever faction you're in, there's a litmus and purity test.
Mm-hmm.
You're facing a new purity test every couple hours,
And there's constant purges
and there's
all the time.
constant purchase.
Mhm.
That's right. I thought of a question during this that I wasn't expecting to ask, but you were on when was your freshman year?
I started fall of 2023 and finished May of
Okay.
2024.
Okay. So, all right. So, all right. So this was a little bit preceded you, but I'm still curious what your opinion on this. Why is it that university student or the radical left on campus got so exercised about the the Israel Gaza conflict, and yet, don't get me wrong, there was excitement about this, but there was never the same kind of intensity over Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Right. It, if you ask me, it fit perfectly the narrative that those on the left usually follow. It's the easiest to market. It's good guys versus bad guys, right? And it fit into a lot of the identitarian um, dichotomies of the time, namely post-colonialism and post-imperialism, anti-imperialism, and all those narratives that were very popular in academia. And like most ideologies, there's always some vein of truth. But again, egregiously oversimplified. I think the difference with Ukraine and Gaza is Russia and Ukraine was European against European, right? That doesn't fit into the narrative. The narrative is Europe exploiting other countries, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Europe absolutely did, if you look at history. But again, it's not always as simple as it's sold. Um, the issue with Ukraine, like it wasn't a cut and dry colony, but it fit the campaign easy. And I'm definitely saying the quiet part out loud here, but
Sure.
with Russia, Ukraine, it's white people against white people.
Sure. And I mean, in addition, who the president of Ukraine is
Mm-hmm.
Jewish.
Exactly. And if it's Israel Gaza, then it's not that. It's white people against everybody else,
Right.
which matched very well with especially the vein of politics that arose out of George Floyd. And again, this is the moderate in me talking, but a lot of these imperial critiques, again using air quotes, they have a lot of historical truth to them. European countries, I just took a course on modern Middle East, and it's hard to deny that European imperialism and management of the Middle East after the fall of the Ottoman Empire did deliberately divide up a lot of nations and drew not very well thought out borders that either intentionally or unintentionally set up the conflict that we have today.
We can call it some cross-sectarian boundaries that
Yes.
perhaps a little too casual in there.
Yeah. Not very well thought out.
Sure.
And
That being said, I'm not to defend the imperialists here for a
Mhm.
second, but
sure.
because of the Ottoman Empire, it was difficult to know where the sectarian divisions were actually going to come. Right? They've been oppressed for so long. If you were looking at the political map in 1921, it's difficult to actually know, like what we do now with hindsight, where the obvious sectarian divisions are. Now, some of this should have been more, accounted for, but that's
Yeah.
not the point.
Yeah. But again, to answer your question, the situation with Israel and Gaza, it was an existing issue that people had been protesting for a long time. And it was good timing. It fit the political climate of the time in the aftermath of George Floyd, in the rise of intersectionality, post-colonialism, postmodernism. It fit the bill, and it gave the groups on the left a perfect example of what they were fighting against. and it was easy to market and obviously very easy to get people riled up because of what we saw.
Sure.
And again, they had a reason to be riled up. I don't think that how they were protesting was an entirely productive way of going about it. I'm not sure how much it made a difference. They have a right to protest.
Sure.
They don't have a right to damage property. I disagree with that. But again, it's never as simple as people would like it to be.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, and in fact, the protests on campus may have been, were probably counterproductive for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is it showed to Israelis that the rest of the world had sided with their opponents,
Right.
the people who murdered their children on October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, probably didn't work out like planned, or maybe that is part of the overall plan. Who knows?
It's hard to tell.
Yeah. No, that anyway. But that issue seems to have been dampened for a bunch of reasons. But where do you see the main fault lines on campus now among students? I mean, you're moderating these meetings. There's different subjects, different themes every week.
Mhm.
Where do you see the main points of disagreement?
Do you mean politically in general?
Sure, we can be more specific, but let's start in general and then go more specific.
That's it's a really good question. Obviously, Donald Trump is a very polarizing figure.
Well, he casts a big shadow.
Yes, yes, he does. And it's difficult to say, but if you ask me right now, the big issue is over immigration and especially with ICE and how that's being brought about and their tactics. Again, as a club, we tend to avoid these hot button issues because that's usually when it devolves into a shouting match. If you're curious, we had a meeting my sophomore year on October 7th. Happened to be a Monday. And we decided to try discussing October 7th on that day. If you ask me, it was not a productive discussion. There was a lot of angry back and forth, and if I recall correctly, some tears. So it's it's hard to tell, but immigration is a big contention right now.
Especially on a campus like Arizona State, where you're gonna have a lot of people who are
Yeah,
here on visas,
we're on a border state. We have a lot of international students.
we're what, 200 miles from the border?
Yeah, it's really not far. Like, get there in a couple hours. But immigration seems to be a big fault line right now, and especially among our more politically minded students, balance of power. I Every time we talk, there's always some issue that finds its way to work into the discussion, whether it's related or not. And lately, it's been several, but those would include the Supreme Court and the power of the Supreme Court, ethics of the Supreme Court, term limits, age limits, everything having to do with that. The Electoral College is one that comes up a lot. Congress, term limits again, age limits. Um, the power of the presidency, who should be president, if the president is a moral leader or not. So I guess it boils down to those two. Immigration, especially as a border state, and balance of power between the three branches of the federal government.
Interesting. Well, perhaps not surprising.
Right.
I mean, those are the issues that I think are being discussed
Mm-hmm.
more broadly. Now, let's get if we can maybe get a little bit more specific on this.
Sure.
Where do you see where do you see y college students talking about are college students speaking about this in a different way than you think the national media environment, or maybe the more, and when I say national media environment, I think everybody's minds goes to cable news. I don't necessarily mean cable news. I mean, it's a lot broader than that. Do college students bring any unique perspectives, I guess, on this question?
Well, inevitably, yes, because most college students don't watch cable news, they look at social media.
Sure.
And that inherently frames the issue differently than cable news. It's a different set of rhetoric, of, like popular vocabulary. And it's hard for me to answer this question because I myself am not on social media. I stay away from that. I don't engage with social media. I read all my news on articles on online news sites. But inevitably, there is a
Well, the
do
problem is that
overlap.
so many articles on online news sites are like, "This tweet happened," or "This tweet happened."
Right.
So you still get the social media even if
Mhm.
you're not out there searching for it.
Yes. But it's really hard to say. There's definitely not as much. Actually, I really don't know. It's hard to tell. It seems less heated and it seems less severe. Yeah, I recently read an article on the New York Times polling voters on what they thought of the Trump administration's strikes on boats in the Caribbean and whether or not they were legal or whether or not they cared if they were legal.
Right.
And some of the things that I saw those voters say, and again, it's individuals, but they seem to not mind um, death as a punishment for doing something that went against the greater good of the United States. Human life, value of human life aside. I think that's one of the voters said. It doesn't seem that severe among college students, but again, it's hard to tell because we haven't been alive as long, obviously, and we have less to compare it to. So, and especially on a college campus where there is so much diversity and there are so many international students and people here on visas. If you ask me, the major difference is the degree of racial rhetoric. From what I've seen on cable news, there seems to be more of that. There seems to be less of that on campus, largely because it's so diverse here and it's not as black and white that it kind of falls flat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. Um, Living in Tempe, Arizona is going to or being around here so maybe I guess maybe this might be the way of putting it. It's hard to say what's different about being on a university campus versus maybe what's just unique about living in Phoenix or living in the same
Sure.
in Maricopa County, Arizona,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, the high school I went to was, I think, 50% Hispanic. I
Sure.
think it was only 33% white. So it was a big school. So when I went to school, I was in the minority.
Sure.
This is what I've grown up with. I've grown up with this diversity.
Right. I mean, and so I'm coming from Georgia. I'm Canadian, but I'm coming through Georgia. And I have to say, like, my experience with, on the ground, face to face politics versus what I've have presented to me, it in person politics is so much tamer, than what I'm presented with online.
Mhm.
And, my instinct with that is that, well, just people in person are nicer to each other and it's just not as venomous, right? It's
Mhm.
not as toxic. But I'm also coming from a purple state to another purple state.
Mm.
And so, maybe just a consequence of people when you live in a purple state, there's more going on to get along.
Mhm.
You just have to.
Yeah.
Not in every corner of the state, it's not purple everywhere in Arizona, just like it's not purple everywhere in Georgia,
Mhm.
but it's a inevitably you're going to have more you're going to have Republican or Democratic neighbors
Yeah.
in a purple state.
There's more of a demand to coexist.
Right.
And just continuing that thought, I recall that the George Floyd protests didn't take off as much here in Phoenix as they did in other places, partly because it's so dang hot here in the summer and pro- protesting on the streets wasn't exactly the safest thing to do. But again, if you just look at demographics, I mean, African Americans make up a very small percentage of the population. I don't remember the exact number, but it's definitely less than 10%.
Hmm.
And it's was very different in places like Minnesota, like the Rust Belt, or places in the South or in other
Well,
parts.
Atlanta was a pretty wild riot in Atlanta
Right.
for 3 days.
Like
Uh,
again, it just wasn't as potent here because there's a much more diverse crowd here. I mean, the saying is that everyone in Phoenix is from somewhere else, and
sure.
to an extent, that's kind of true. I mean, everyone here really is from all over the place.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, Atlanta was a little bit like that, a little bit of a transient town. I mean, as Sunbelt city that has exploded
Right.
in economic growth, which has just led to, lots of migration
Mhm.
in from around the country, which again, also like Phoenix, this actually does, I think, kind of moderate people's
Yeah,
perspectives and politics because you're going to know people from all over the country.
exactly. I mean, if any place is going to be a melting pot, it's going to be one of the warmest cities,
Oh, there's that. Yeah,
right?
for sure. Pun fully intended
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me again, you being a moderate and a studious independent allows me to ask this question in a way that I'm going to get a different answer for you maybe than I'm going to get from say Jack, who's a Democrat, or at least he's a Republican.
Mhm.
How do you perceive without in how do you perceive the college left right now? And then I'm going to ask you about the college right.
It's a good question. From my perspective, the college left definitely has this atmosphere of, I'm not saying this to like insult what they've done, but the atmosphere of defeat. I have many friends on both sides, and I had a lot of friends that were just broken by Donald Trump's victory last November. I remember going to a like club practice the day after, and everyone there was pretty far left, and it was a
This is
3 hour.
not the politics and leadership.
No, this is a different club, and it was a 3 hour.
Your Marxist Leninist club.
Sure, it wasn't. It was, if you're curious, it was mock trial.
Oh, okay.
Mock trial tends to have as a pretty liberal constituency, but everyone in, obviously there are plenty of exceptions because it's a big club like ASU is a big school, but and on my team, it was, everyone there was pretty far left, and we probably didn't do anything for an hour and a half. We kind of just talked. I think maybe half the room was in tears. Just really, really, and just blindsided too. I mean, as an outsider, I could definitely see Trump's victory coming. Again, I'm a student of history. Um, I there are things that I recognized, and I'm like, Donald Trump is probably going to win, and he did. He won, I think, all the battleground states. I wasn't surprised, but a lot of them were, and it was a devastating blow that I don't think the college left has fully recovered from. I don't think they've had an issue that they feel comfortable uniting behind, or that will productively bring them together, just because the Trump victory so shattered a lot of their efforts and what they were hoping for. And I haven't seen a lot of activity from the left, or a lot of enthusiasm or hope from the left. I think largely because of the Trump administration's victory and how quickly the Trump administration has moved too. They have wasted no time in implementing what they said they were going to do. And with every new development, it's almost like beating them back down. Like, it doesn't seem like the college left has had a chance to recover from Donald Trump's victory. And so, again, to summarize and to directly answer your question, I think they still feel defeated. They haven't found something to unite behind. And with each new development in national politics, it makes it harder for them to get back up.
Interesting. Interesting. All right, let's talk about the college right then.
Sure.
Who should have felt really galvanized coming out of 12 months ago.
Yes. And for those 12 months, I would say, yeah, they did. It definitely seemed like they didn't have to hide as much. They didn't have to shut their mouth as much. And before Donald Trump's victory, I definitely found myself in a similar camp at times where I censored what I wanted to say. I held back because I was afraid of the consequences. And I sympathize with the college right, because it's really not fun. I think everyone has a right to speak their mind, Obviously within reason. I mean,
Well, I mean, not free of any consequence, but,
sure. I mean,
but free of official consequences anyway.
yes, I'm not a scholar of free speech and the history of free speech in the United States, but that's its own discussion. But I do believe people should be allowed to speak more than they did before Donald Trump's victory. Their victory was definitely a huge win. It definitely felt more balanced in the period afterwards. But again, as I said earlier, Charlie Kirk's assassination was a huge shock, especially for college students. I mean, Charlie Kirk was an Arizona guy. He came to ASU. I saw him here several times. And I mentioned earlier, last year, I was friends with the president of Turning Point. We met on a trip sponsored by the Center of American Institutions. And we got along. Obviously, we didn't agree on everything, but she was a nice lady. And I still consider her a friend. But again, in the aftermath of that, it was almost like a reality check. Like, it seemed like they were free from what was holding them back, but Charlie Kirk's death was, again, it was a reality check, especially for college students, because he was the leader of
The
college
Avatar.
right. Avatar. That is a great descriptor of what Charlie Kirk was for the college right, and they lost that. And in some way, that was a defeat for them as well. It was a shock that they weren't ready for, and to be honest, no one was ready for. I think it caught everyone off guard. And so in some ways, as an independent, it seems like they're in a similar spot as the left right now. There is an element of defeat, of fear, and there's definitely a vacuum for a viable avatar. The left hasn't had one since Kamala Harris, and I think a lot of us would agree that Kamala Harris was kind of a last-minute avatar, to use the term.
Yeah, she wasn't a particularly effective one either.
No, I would agree with you there.
I think right now, I mean, just from what I see, I mean, for the young left, I imagine Zoran Mamdani is probably the closest, but he's an elected official. Elected officials are weird avatars because they have to manage coalitions.
Yeah, and he's a city mayor when it comes down to it. I mean, one of the most important cities in the world, but at the end of the day, he's still a city mayor.
And very few people in Phoenix will be casting their ballot for Zoran Mamdani.
Exactly. So we're at this point now between the right and the left where everything, again, saying this as an independent, seems eerily quiet. It doesn't seem like the temperature is high. It almost seems like the temperature is too low. It seems like we went from very hot to very cold. The left is, again, defeated, lost, and afraid. And for different reasons, the college right is now in a very similar boat.
Well, the college right has also lost their other avatar, who is an elected official, Donald Trump,
Yeah,
because he's becoming a lame duck.
exactly. And so it's almost like the people I know are drifting, It's,
Is everything in play?
I think so. It ironically benefits the club because it makes it easier for us to keep the temperature down because it's already so low.
Interesting.
But it's been very quiet, like eerily so.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we can put your speculation hat on here. What are the sort of, I mean, we're coming up into a midterm year.
Mm-hmm.
If there's ever a year where the temperature's low, it's the 12 months after a presidential election,
Right.
right? Because it's,
Mm-hmm.
there's sort of this supernova moment where everything goes supernova in a presidential election, and then everybody needs 15 months to kind of recover.
Especially this one with the kind of political comeback that President Trump mounted.
Sure. Which began the day after the midterms in 2022.
Exactly.
So it was a 2-year comeback
Yeah.
right? It's kind of hard to forget or kind of hard to remember now, but at this time in the last cycle, maybe because COVID was everywhere, so it was sort of still hard to kind of
Mhm.
maybe because the last two presidential cycles when Trump, maybe in 2021, COVID was still everywhere, so things were still heated, and in 2017 it was hashtag resistance,
Sure.
right? So there was a lot of energy.
Mhm.
It's probably 2013 since you've had a cycle where in that first 12 months following the presidential election, things have been this quiet.
Yeah.
Because in 2013, the Republicans were shattered.
Mhm.
They honestly had no idea what to do. That's how you get the famous postmortem. And then,
Mhm.
everybody assumes that it's going to lead to the inevitable Jeb Bush triumph in 2016, which is, of course, happened, right?
Mhm.
And Donald Trump in 2013 writes an essay saying how it's important that the Republican Party is much nicer to immigrants, and how that, like, if the Republican Party doesn't become a party of being open and more welcome to immigrants, they're never going to win another election, which
Mhm.
of course is exactly how that turned out.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and the Democrats, it was the end of the Obama. It was the beginning of the end of the Obama.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a good point. That's something that if you consider college students, a lot of us haven't experienced in a long time.
You wouldn't remember it was more than a decade ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would have been in like 6th, 7th grade.
Right.
It's been a long time. Like, we almost don't know what to do with ourselves
Yeah.
because it's been so much, like, as you said, like energy and momentum for so long.
So where do you see but I mean, that isn't going to last.
No, of course not.
So where do you see the energy going?
It's hard to say. It really depends on who rises to become those avatars of the left and the right, because that's especially important for college students given how we've grown up on the internet. Like, avatars are everything. Like, social media stars are everything. It's charisma, captivating personalities that gets people excited.
Right.
And it depends on if those people do the right things, if they get people's attention, and how much attention they get and what kind of attention they get. I mean, as you said, like, Zoran Mamdani he's a good contender for the left. The right lost the figurehead of Charlie Kirk, but it's difficult to say if Nick Fuentes is going to take his place,
Sure.
especially because of how much the Republican Party establishment does not like him. And to some extent, the same could be said of the Democratic establishment and Zoran Mamdani. It's it depends on if we can have new charismatic figures. Again, to repeat the term avatar, because I think it's a great descriptor of what both the college right and the college left need to be reinvigorated. And
Mhm.
something's going to happen.
Sure.
I don't know what.
Well, I mean, nobody was predicting October 7th.
No, and no one was
I
predicting
mean,
Charlie Kirk's death either.
well, no kidding. I mean, in the case of October 7th, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor under Joe Biden, penned a piece in Foreign Affairs that was initially published the week before October 7th. It might have been 2 weeks before October 7th, pointing to the Biden administration's success in the Middle East, and his evidence was how quiet everything's been.
Right? Something is going to explode.
Right.
I don't know what. It could be a million different things.
I blame Sullivan for that to some degree because, I mean, you were begging for it.
He totally jinxed it.
Yeah, I totally jinxed it.
And I'm sure I'm jinxing it right now when I say everything's quiet. I'm sure in a few months or so, something is going to happen.
Well, nothing has popped up as an alert on my phone since you've said that, but maybe between now and when we post this on Thursday, it's Monday afternoon.
Who
now,
knows, right? I mean, yeah, politics, really, the world is really volatile right now. And
Yeah, that is interesting. That is really interesting.
Mhm.
Everything is so volatile, yet everything's so quiet.
something is going to happen.
Right.
I don't know what, but something will happen.
Maybe it's because things are moving so fast
Yeah.
that people just can't get a firm hold on anything.
Mhm. I feel like for people to get a firm hold, it really has to be so egregious and so catastrophic.
Right.
So, again, it seems like this is the quiet before the storm. Like, both
Well,
sides are down. Both sides are kind of like nursing their wounds, but
Oh, I'm so
We're gonna
now
get back up.
I mean, I was always glad we were gonna have this conversation, but now I'm so glad we had this conversation
Yeah, me too.
because I think that I mean, the club's success is tremendous but that conclusion right there is fascinating. And I'm totally compelled and convinced by it. And but again, this just goes to show you, you're a guy who's moderating this club where where people from all sides are discussing. So you get this unique window,
Mhm.
especially as a studious independent.
Yes.
You get this unique window into what is driving.
Yeah, it pairs nicely with, my interest in history
Sure.
because I feel like I get to see politics through a historical lens, but also again, like you said, I don't have as much skin in the game.
Yeah. Well, Jake, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we'll definitely have you on against it. That was great.
Yeah.